I went home last night, and my husband and I tend to recap our days, sitting in our chairs, our not matching chairs, but close to matching chairs, and I was bragging on you guys and saying how fun it was to have a discussion, and kids are actually discussing. So yeah, that I really appreciate your input yesterday, and it made my day. So thank you for that. I'm going to read this passage, so you can open your Bibles to John 9. It's a fairly lengthy passage, but it'll help us as we walk through this lecture. So beginning at John 9:1. As he passed by, so meaning he is Jesus, right? He saw a man blind from birth, and his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, it was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me, the works of God, while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Having said these things, he stood on the ground and made mud with the saliva. Then he anointed the man's eyes with the mud and said to him, go wash in the pool of Siloam, which means sent. So he went and washed and came back seeing. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar were saying, is this not the man who used to sit and beg? Some said, it is he. Others said, no, but he is like him. He looks like him. He kept saying, I am the man. So they said to him, then how were your eyes opened? He answered, the man called Jesus made mud and anointed my eyes and said to me, go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed and received my sight. They said to him, where is he? He said, I do not know. They brought the Pharisees to the man who had formerly been blind. Now it was the Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. So the Pharisees again asked him how he had received his sight. And he said to them, he put mud on my eyes, and I washed, and I see. Some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath. But others said, how can a man who is a sinner do such signs? And there was division among them. So they said again to the blind man, what do you say about him, since he opened your eyes? And he said, the blind man said, he is a prophet. The Jews did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight and asked them, is this your son, who you say was born blind? How then does he now see? His parents answered, we know this is our son, and we know that he was born blind, but how he now sees, we do not know. Nor do we, know who opened his eyes. Ask him, he is of age. He will speak for himself. His parents said these things because they feared the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that if anyone should confess Jesus to be Christ, he was to be put out of the synagogue. Therefore, his parents said, he is of age. Ask him. So, for the second time, they called the man who had been blind and said to him, give glory to God. Tell the truth, basically. We know that this man is a sinner. He answered, whether he is a sinner, I do not know. One thing I do know, that though I was blind, now I see. They said to him, what did you do to him? What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? He answered them, I have told you already, and you would not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples? And they reviled him, saying, you are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses. As for this man, we do not know where he comes from. The man answered, why this is an amazing thing. You do not know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, God listens to him. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. They answered him, you were born in utter sin, and would you teach us? And they cast him out. Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and having found him, said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He answered, "And who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, and it is he who is speaking to you." He said, "Lord, I believe," and he worshipped him. Jesus said, "For judgment I came into this world, and that those who do not see may see, and those who see may become blind." Some of the Pharisees near him heard these things and said to him, "Are we also blind?" Jesus said to them, if you were blind, you would have no guilt. But now that you say we see, your guilt remains. So I'm going to stop this for a second. This is the verse just before what we just read. So they picked up stones to throw at him, but Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple. We talked about that verse in the last chapter. And maybe this is something miraculous, or maybe not. But we're gonna, when we continue to verse 9:1, it seems like no time has passed, but there may have been some time that passed. John just doesn't tell us. We don't know how much later this was. So as he passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. So it might have been immediately, like he comes out of the treasury and he sees this man in the temple who is blind, or maybe just outside the temple because the beggars kind of congregated there. Maybe, but maybe not. It doesn't tell us for sure. So it might have been immediately after, but we don't know. So these two verses are kind of tied. They're kind of a bridge or a transition to this next story that we've just read about. And we learn a number of things about Jesus through this story. We see his compassion. The man didn't ask to be healed. He saw the man and he had compassion, and he healed the man, right? And this also shows us things about Jesus, right? So Christ was never too busy to win someone to himself. He was never too busy to meet the need of people, to talk with people, to heal people. And then Jesus is more concerned with the welfare of others than his own. There are many times when he is being surrounded by people, and almost like a smothering of people. I don't know who it is today that is like somebody that all the girls love. Back in my day, there were some teen idols that were very popular. And I still am a very avid Donny Osmond fan. I know you probably don't know who Donny Osmond is, but trust me.
Don't you have a husband just kiss her?
He's fine with it. He's fine with it. Yeah, I've kissed him 3 times, so he's fine with it. It's a long story. Well, I'll tell it to you someday. But my daughter ripped up the last picture that I had.
Also,
Yeah, she was very angry. And so he was being mobbed everywhere he went. Everywhere he went, people wanted to see him, almost like one of those teen idols that like Taylor Swift, right? Like Taylor Swift. And everybody wanted to see him do something, right? So he was more concerned with the welfare of others than his own. And he did. I mean, there were times when he got away on his own and had some alone time, but he was largely around people all the time, and he was doing what they needed to do. In fact, this man didn't ask to be healed; he just initiated that, right? So we see that he is caring for this man. And then Jesus notices the outcasts of our society, the ones whom we typically don't don't see. And I don't know about you, but we, when you're driving in down the road and maybe you're stopped at a stoplight and there's a homeless person, do you make eye contact? Generally not, right? It's uncomfortable for us. And Jesus is willing to engage with those who nobody else. Right? Oh,
Your copy order?
thank you very much.
Just making sure
Okay, I'm sorry.
No.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay. That must have been a while ago. I figured I wasn't getting one myself. Okay, uh, so we are to do that as well. I think as people, we tend to think of ourselves first and others second, and that's kind of the backwards economy of Christianity. That we are to think of others first and not ourselves. The world says, look out for number one, yourself. And Jesus says, no, we need to love others and care for others. And I'm guilty of this, right? I get busy, especially during basketball season, and I don't see the needs of others around me. And we need to be people who are looking who we can serve, who we can bless. God's economy is very different than ours. Our culture, as I said, wants us to take care of ourselves, right? And God says it's those who lose their life for the gospel who will really live. And over and over, the Bible tells us to see the unseen and to include the unincluded. If you just look in your concordance, the words widow, alien, and orphan, or stranger, instead of alien, it doesn't mean like outer space. It means somebody that's from another country. So if you look up those three words, you will find oh, that's not my copy. You will find those words over and over and over again. Take care of the widow, the alien, and the orphan. Why? What do those three groups have in common? They don't have anyone to help them, right? In that culture, you were a widow. Your husband had died. He was the one that had to take care of you. You literally couldn't take care of yourself. You couldn't have a job, and if you didn't have male children to take care of, that's what Paul calls in the New Testament widows who are truly orphans, really, or are truly widows who don't have anyone to take care of. And then the person that comes from another country speaks a different language, has different ideas, has a different culture, and they're in this unfamiliar culture. I remember going on a field trip in fourth or fifth grade to a Korean temple in Seoul, South Korea, and it was so foreign to me. And then seeing going to these markets where there was raw octopus and things that like that fourth fifth grade girls like this is gross. And I remember going to our maid's house. She had made dinner for us, and my mother said, and I'm like 10, whatever, 11, and my mother told us we were to be quiet, we were to have good manners, and they sit me down right in front of the raw octopus, and I went, and my mom went, Miss Chung has been cooking for days for this. Don't do that. Now, I didn't eat it. She said, you don't have to eat it. but it was so foreign to me. It was so different than what I was used to. But God says we're supposed to get uncomfortable. If our lives are comfortable all the time, and I'm guilty of that much of the time, then we're not doing what God's calling us to do. Feed those who have no food. Take care of the widow, the alien, and the orphan. And that's what we're to be about. We're to be about including the unincluded and seeing the unseen. And that's hard to do sometimes because we all have a tendency to be self-righteous, to have our relationship with Christ and nothing else. But faith is only faith when it is in our lives. If we have faith, it will show in our lives. Not perfectly, none of us is perfect, but it will show. So that's the attitude that Jesus had, and he looked out for others, and sometimes we look down on others, maybe because they're poor or they've been caught in sin or they don't know Jesus. Jesus never rejected those people. And in fact, he rejected the self-righteous Jewish leaders, right? Those the people who were holy. He rejected them. The ones that were caught in sin, he had compassion. Not judgment, compassion. And yeah, he calls us to love and care for the lost, for the sick, for the imprisoned, for the destitute. And that should cause us to think about who we're admiring and who we are serving and who we're not. And live as Christ. Now, this next thing I changed. In your book, it says the simple-mindedness of the disciples. I think that is unfair, so I changed it to misunderstanding. If you want to change it in your book, you're welcome to do that. But you can keep it simple-mindedness. So here's what they believed, and this is something that most people believed in Jesus' day. That if you had a physical, mental, whatever situation, you brought that on. That was caused by your sin. And so that's why they say, who sinned, this guy or his parents, that he was born blind. Now, I doubt he sinned in the womb, and he was born blind. But they would have probably believed that the parents did something that caused God to have him be born blind. Now we know now that's not true. Always. Now there are sins that lead to things that are bad, right? If you're gonna get drunk every night for your entire adult life, don't blame God if you get cirrhosis of the liver. You did that, right? It's not God's fault. You made decisions, or if you smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day for your entire adult life, don't blame God for the lung cancer. That's your doing, right? But there are people that whose problems, whether they're physical or mental or whatever, had nothing to do with it. They didn't deserve what happened. I don't know if you know this, but about 4 years ago, I think, Mr. Hood lost his sister to brain cancer. She was a young woman, and at least by my reckoning, she didn't deserve that. Why would God allow that? Why would God allow my father to have Alzheimer's? Why would he allow my mother to have macular degeneration, which eventually took almost all her sight? and then a weird, unusual cancer that actually did take her life. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Um, and it was, I remember when we were in the doctor's office when she was first diagnosed with gallbladder cancer. And it's not you don't inherit it. It's not inherited. And he was asking her questions like, have you ever been around stagnant water in Asia? And different, like, things in uh, environmental things. And none of them, well, I mean, the closest was the stagnant water because we didn't live in Asia. But, and she traveled to Asia. But she didn't know. And she didn't, deserve that, right? And we can't know. And there are a number of people that, famous people that have gone through things that we don't understand. And the truth is, I'll read this first. And the disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, it was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. So their error was that physical problems are punishment for sin. Rabbi, who sinned that this man or his parents, that he was born blind. And that isn't true. Like, it isn't a punishment from God. Anything, whatever it is, isn't a punishment from God. But there is a purpose. And the purpose is that physical ailments allow God to manifest his glory. It is often not in the easy times that we grow closer to God or we grow in our faith. It is generally in those difficult times. As you look back over your life, you can see how God met you in that trial, met you in that circumstance, and strengthened you through it. I told you the story of my father praying, Dear God, thank you for giving me this disease, because without it, I wouldn't know how much my family loved me. Fanny Crosby was a hymn writer, and you likely know some of her songs. And she had a disease as a child that made her blind. And she wrote a number of famous hymns. Blessed Assurance, Tell Me the Story of Jesus, Praise Him, All You Little Children, and To God Be the Glory. Just dozens of hymns that she poured out her faith into. And I think you probably, Johnny Erickson Tana, anybody heard about Johnny Erickson Tana? Yeah. So as a teenager, she lived in California. And she went to the beach, as she often did, and she dove into the ocean, as she often did. And she was paralyzed by the neck down, and she still is. But she has a worldwide ministry that is phenomenal. And she goes around speaking. I was at a Women of Faith conference where she was speaking, and as she rolled onto the stage, I started to cry. It was so powerful just seeing her live and in person. And God has used her in powerful ways. I think you all know Alex France, one of our coaches for cross country. And he grew up in our church. And I remember when he was in high school, early in high school, maybe a freshman, he was diagnosed with this eye disease that he is going blind, and he is legally blind now, and he will eventually be completely blind. And I remember, hearing his story, and he did a video for our church about it. And he hasn't let him stop what he's done, right? He still runs. He ran for, in college, I'm blipping on the name of the school. He ran cross country. He runs with our team. He has a guide leader, and he holds on to the tech. But it hasn't stopped him from growing in his faith and having a ministry of his own. And then the last person I want to talk to you about was a young man named Chad. Chad Matthews. Chad was the younger son of my mother's best friend. In the last years of her life, Robin was her best friend. And Chad was born with Down syndrome. But I believe that Chad, and though his life was short, he died, I don't know if he was in his 20s, somewhere, maybe 30. And Chad was the most cheerful human being I have ever known. If you asked him how he was, no matter what, he'd say, "I'm fine. I'm fine." Chad worked at the preschool where my children went to preschool, and we picked that preschool because each of our children were pretty young when they went to preschool, and I wanted them to see a familiar face. And he helped out in the classroom. And he was so precious. And in December of 1933, I wrote a poem for Chad, about Chad, and I'm going to read it to you. It's pretty personal to me, but I'm going to read it to you. And I keep it on my board there to remind me that Chad loved everyone. Chad didn't ever look down on anyone. So this is what I've learned from Chad. I wish you knew this friend of mine, a sweet and handsome lad, but rather let me write of him, this lovely man named Chad. I learned so many very things that they far exceed this pad, but let me try to list for you some things I've learned from Chad. To possess a deep and childlike faith, the kind I wish I had. To see in all whatever's good, that's what I see in Chad. To look at life with cheerful eyes and see it's not so bad. To laugh at unexpected times, that's what I've learned from Chad. To help whoever is in need and only be so too glad to serve with joy the least of these, that's what I've learned from Chad. A higher form of fashion sense, smashing garments clad, to match my stockings with my shirt, I've also learned from Chad. The world may see a paradox, and some may not believe, but I have learned much more from Chad than he'll ever learn from me. And so I wish you knew this man. I know that if you had, you too would feel so blessed to learn so many things from Chad. We are to be about those who need Jesus, those who don't have a voice. We are to be a voice to the voiceless. We are to be a covering for those who are marginalized. We are to include the unincluded. It is all over the Bible. In short, we're to be more like Jesus. And that's what this miracle is all about. We're going to stop there. We'll pick up here tomorrow because this is